done with the account, then you start investing in something as simple as a Nifty piece, BEES. So that is an ETF on Nifty. So what happens is that it is investing broadly in the 50 top companies of the country, of the markets. So that would be including stocks like SBI, ICICI, LARSAR and True, or PG, or working it through the different background, want to find their finance journey and to learn things in finance, how we can start a journey in finance.
So how should a student start off with their journey in finance or in investing? Where do you begin essentially? Welcome to our podcast. Today at DoMs NALSAR, the Department of Management Studies at NALSAR University, we're in the presence of a very distinguished guest, Mr. Aswini Bajaj. Mr. Bajaj is a commerce graduate and a qualified CA, CS, CFA, FRM, and the list continues to go on very long. He has over 10 years of experience in teaching, training, consulting, and research in the field of finance. He's the founder and the director of Aswini Bajaj classes, Leverage Growth, and Invest in Yourselves, which are platforms for providing education, advisory, and mentoring services to students and professionals across the globe. He has also been a guest lecturer at various B schools and colleges and a corporate trainer for companies like Tata, Barclays, and Grasim. He has a YouTube channel with over 1 lakh subscribers where he shares his insights and experiences on various topics related to finance. He's also a regular contributor to various publications and media outlets such as Forbes, Midday, and PwC. We are extremely lucky to have a few insights from him today on how to navigate the complicated world of finance. Welcome, sir. Thank you so much for your time today.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me here.
So to start off, since you're at a college and we were thinking...
So firstly, as we were discussing, when a student is looking at a finance journey, first of all, you have to understand the importance of it. So one, the levels of inflation that we're looking at. Second, our consumption basket is very, very huge as compared to our parents, what they had. Third, medical and travel expenses will go up because this involves a major service component. And this is something that we're going to be consuming a lot more because people want to travel today. And with the kind of pollution levels, etc., there is a major requirement for medical expenses. So that is something we need to understand. And fourth, everybody talks about financial freedom, although it's very misconstrued. We'll probably talk about that sometime. But then we talk about the retirement expenses and the planning that you have to do. So, for example, for our parents' generation, I'm the retirement plan for my father. But then can we say that for the next generation? Maybe, may not be. You'll have to evaluate your situation. But then retirement planning becomes very important today because there are various factors involved. So given all of this, your financial planning becomes extremely important, and it is not going to be exactly the way it used to be a generation before. And today somehow we see, in 5 years or 10 years, a generation shift is happening.
Yes.
The way things are changing so quickly. So understanding the importance, that is one. Second, we start planning as to where to start, which is what your question was about. So when we're looking at the starting point, the first thing is you open, let's say, a brokerage account. With any of the apps and all, good ones are there. So I use Rotha personally. Once you're done with the account, then you start investing in something as simple as a Nifty piece, BEES. So that is an ETF on Nifty. So what happens is that it is investing broadly in the 50 top companies of the country. Of the markets. So that would be including stocks like an SBI, an ICICI, LARSAR and True. It'll be having stocks from pharma, oil and gas, real estate, infrastructure, textile, all of those. So when you're putting in your money in the top 50 companies, the risk levels are relatively lower. Of course, it's risky, but again, I do not expect these 50 companies to be going down or going under the bus. And in fact, like Punjab National Bank was removed from these 50 companies. So so when PNB was not doing well, it is going to be automatically thrown out of the index and another one included. So that's one of the ways to start with because it is going to be less risky and it could be trading at 200, 300 rupees within that range or so. So you start there. Then you start, say for example, if a student has a family business or so, or if somebody is a working professional and working in a particular industry, or if you have an inclination towards an industry, then you identify that industry first. Suppose somebody's got a steel related business back home. So you pick up a Tisco, you pick up a Tata Steel stock. You start looking at that stock. You start gaining interest and understanding in that industry. Or if you're working, let's say, you are doing a job in an FMCG related company. Suppose somebody is doing a job in an electronics related space. You start looking at a Philips or something. So you figure out a stock in that space because you'll have an understanding of the industry. And as you learn about the stock and the industry, your work life also, you're developing that specialization and you have more interest and inclination. So then you start picking up out of the top 100, 500 stocks of the market leaders, you start picking up one or two over there. You start understanding that. Then you start reading an industry report on that industry. Then you start looking at those small cap, micro cap stocks and all, because that is where probably the value lies.
Yes.
And then you start reading more, developing a specialization in one industry. But from investment perspective, if some student is not a finance guy and he's not planning to pursue finance, let's say, but you're going to make money, you'll need retirement funds, you start putting in ETFs. Nifty Bs, the easiest, safest starting point. Then you maybe start picking up a little bit of gold ETF, let's say. Then you start understanding, okay, what is the proportion of equity in this I'll have? Right? So that's probably a starting point to begin with.
Sir, another question I have, yesterday only, one of my students asked me, my batchmate asked me regarding, if I'm not from the finance background, he's from HR background, but then also the basic level of finance knowledge is necessary. If someone from a UG or a PG or a working age from the different background want to finance their finance journey and to learn things in finance, how we can start his journey in finance?
So you can start with something as simple as a book like Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. And it's an exceptionally good book and very important, particularly with the misinformation that the influencers spend without having an iota of knowledge in finance. So that is one. Second is you need to understand whether you're trying to amalgamate your stream with finance as a career. So suppose somebody is studying law, since you're at NALSAR. So somebody is studying law and wants to get into drafting and agreements and mergers, acquisition transactions and structuring of, let's say, a VC fund and all of that, and the entire legal aspect around it. So you'll have to understand finance and putting up documents of ESOPs and everything. So in that case, you understand and you combine finance and law as a part of your career. Somebody who's, let's say, into we are talking about political science and having a, let's say, journalism related, mass comm related background and wants to get into financial journalism. What if you want to be an anchor on one of the business news channels? So how do you combine different streams with finance? In that case, you begin studying finance, you read Psychology of Money. Is anyways, everybody has to read in terms of personal finance. So personal finance is something everybody has to learn. But when we're talking about finance per se with career, then you start specializing and you take up a course in finance and specialize in it. And then you see how the two areas are combining together and moving forward in your career.
Well said by Phil.
So you've also worked in the education sector where you must have had multiple students. Do you think the world is changing constantly with now AI and so on. Do you think education itself as a space is changing, growing, or do you think that it might not be moving in the right direction? Especially even if it comes to a space in finance in particular also. Do you think people are inclined? How do you prevent yourself from getting lured by the shortcuts that the world constantly tells you to take and instead make rational decisions? Where do you prevent yourself from doing that?
So firstly, every industry is going through a major shift. So we're living in times where, 20 years back or 30 years back, you would be able to say that a businessman thinks that his son is going to continue the same business in the same format as well. And his son is going to be doing the same. But today that comes under a question mark. So even the work that you're doing, you're not sure as to how it's going to be changing as we move forward. At the same time, what you need to do is you need to understand the concepts and the mental model so well. For example, when GST came in, it's not that the indirect tax practitioners have gone outdated, because those who are doing well already, those who had an understanding of how, because even the person who's framing the tax laws has a certain understanding, he understands the economy, he knows what I want to tax more and less and why and how the the entire process works. So you need to understand things today in a very, very detailed and a very nice, holistic manner. In order to be relevant in the industry, you have to be absolutely on your toes in terms of reading and learning and updating yourself. At the same time, the basics and the foundation has to be rock solid, even though you're evolving in terms of your approach and the way you're looking at things. So education industry, like any other industry, is going through major changes and shifts. But it is those who are not looking at shortcuts, as you mentioned, who are going to be surviving. Now, with more information, there is more misinformation as well. So how do you tackle that? So you start, so something that you have to do is you have to start reading a little bit of psychology. I recommended this Social Dilemma movie on Netflix. So you understand how the social media games us. So you understand the business model. You start learning and reading about the sales manual also. So there is a way people pitch those sales. And when I look at an ad or something, I'm like, what nonsense is this? I mean, there are people who just follow the rule book from 1 to 10. And if you know that, you will not be gamed by it. And third, when you learn and read about psychology, it just so happens I'm just about to finish this book, complete this book, Same as Ever, by Morgan Housel again. Wonderful piece. So it talks about why there are always bubbles in the economy. So if so much information is there, if so much of finance everybody understands, so why would we see bubbles happening in the economy and a cycle and a pattern repeating? Because it's going, human greed and human beings are always going to be behaving in a certain pattern. So if you want to be that outlier, if you do not want to be carried away in that, you need to learn. That is where you start reading. And also you, for example, it's a very simple shortcut that I follow. It's not a shortcut. I would not want to say call it a shortcut, but it's a very simple rule that I follow. That's a better word. No, not even a smart cut. It's a simple rule that I follow. Anybody who pushes me to spend more unnecessarily, become lazy, become less ethical, look at short term, sell me shortcuts, I unfollow that immediately. Because even the memes and all, that has a certain subconscious impact on you, which you do not realize, where you'll see a lot of memes. What's the point of studying in a classroom when you can simply be Zuckerberg becomes a poster boy for college dropouts? But what people don't see is that he studied and coded and worked even more than the other college mates. Or Steve Jobs was attending calligraphy classes, which he used in his Apple font, etc., which he did not even enroll for. So what people take away subconsciously is that I don't need to be in a classroom, or I don't need to learn, or I don't need to study, or I don't need to learn. So when I'm saying study, I'm not talking about mugging up. I'm talking about learning. But they don't copy that calligraphy and that extra class and that extra hard work which was put in by these.